Hi, mystery writers. I wanted to tell you that I am working on a new mini course about mystery characters and how to think about them in your mystery. It comes with a workbook for all the characters, and it should be live later this month. And there'll be a special pre-sale, so I'll let you know when that happens. But today I want to talk about scene dynamics and the importance of each and every scene in your mystery. A scene is a revelation. It's peeling back the curtains and revealing a character's mind. Adam Skelter said that in The Art of Story. So every story is built with scenes. They are the building blocks for each chapter and each plot point and act in your story. And a scene is a story unit where an event takes place that changes a character's emotional state, and that change is the pivot point of the scene. The change is usually from positive to negative or negative to positive, and if the character enters happy, they should leave sad. And if they enter angry, they should leave surprised. And if they enter full of anxiety, they should end relieved. So that pivoting of the scene is how the character's emotional makeup changes from the beginning to the end. And that change is going to keep your scene from being static. So you can build your scene with a 3-step process. And if you start your scene knowing these components, you move from one to the other to construct a succinct mini story with a beginning, middle, and end. So each scene is a mini story, and each scene has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So those 3 basic components are the point of view. Character wants something at the beginning of the scene. They're ready to do something. And then somewhere in the scene, something blocks your character. And the third component is a confrontation where the point of view character succeeds or fails. So each of these scenes works through the scene question. It asks a question, there's a conflict, and then there's the answer to the question, and the answer is usually that emotional change in your character. So whatever emotion your character brings to the beginning of the scene, the conflict will cause an emotional turn. And the turn is the axis around which the scene involves. It's the pivot point. Each scene is like a piece of evidence to build your story to the story climax. So I think one of the best ways that you can approach writing a scene is to frame it with questions. Um, who wants what? What happens if they don't get it? And why now? Writer and director David Mamet says, the answer to these questions is the litmus paper. Apply them, and the answer will tell you if the scene is dramatic or not. So drama is what keeps the reader turning pages, and so you want to start each scene for you with these questions. Who wants what? What happens if they don't get it? And why now? And you will nail that scene's drama. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional change. The extent of emotional change in the scene depends on its context and location in the story. For instance, if a scene is located in Act 2, it might have more of a subtle shift of emotion, perhaps a minor complication or a small success. And at the midpoint of your story, the scene will have a more dramatic change. The character will feel like the floor has dropped beneath them and wonder what they're doing and if they will succeed. So the amount of emotional impact depends on pacing and the theme you want to convey. Readers are drawn to contrast. So whatever scene has the most contrast from one emotion to the next emotion will have the most meaning for your reader. So you want to save those big emotional scenes for the major plot points in your story. Even when the scene is not a high contrast, it still needs an emotional turn. So your work is to find the scenarios of conflict that evoke an emotional response in your reader. And that's going to happen because they have an emotional connection to the character. So find the areas of conflict that cause your character to respond in a believable emotional way. And you are in control. You're the writer, right? You control the pacing. So when you vary the depth of emotional conflict in each scene, you control the pacing of the story. Some of those scenes are going to have smaller emotional changes, and some are going to have very large, significant emotional changes. If every scene contains high emotional conflict, your story becomes melodrama, so you don't want that. And the reader also finds that story unbelievable. It's like everything is high impact. The story fails to resonate as truthful, and this is also true when a character overreacts emotionally to a small incident. Your supporting characters can overreact, but make sure your protagonist, your sleuth, responds with appropriate emotions to the conflict. For example, a suspect may overreact and act out to your sleuth's questioning, but your sleuth must react not to the acting out, but how the suspect is leading him to solve the crime or not. So the so even if your supporting character, your suspect, is acting out and being emotional and doing all this crazy stuff, the emotional connection you want for your reader is the emotional change in your protagonist. And that's why you want to build stakes, both physical and emotional, as the story progresses. Because every time there's a conflict, those stakes are at risk. So when a scene does not contain all three elements, your reader is likely to lose interest in the story. So let's look at some what I call scene stoppers, all right? Uh, these are the empty scenes that don't move the story forward. So one of them is just straight out narrative explanation. Without an emotional experience, your reader's going to lose interest. And that's why backstory and long setting descriptions can lose a reader. So you always want to focus in each scene on what the emotion is at the beginning and what the emotion is at the end. Also, another scene stopper is conversation but not dialogue. Um, Characters chat about the weather or how the cat got out last night or anything that doesn't move the story forward. You really want to examine why you even have that dialogue in your story at all. Another one is empty spectacle. Mysteries with historical or futuristic settings may include spectacles for the sake of verisimilitude, bringing that story world to life. So you have to be careful with this. As in any story, the scene must be integral to moving this story along. So here's a quick checklist before you leave your scene. Check to ensure your scene deserves a place in the story, and this is going to keep you from writing empty scenes. All right, you want to know the entering emotional state of that point of view character, and that's usually your protagonist. And you want to know the character's objective in the scene. What do they want to happen in that scene? You need the conflict, what impedes them from getting what they want. You want the motive for the antagonism. Your reader needs to know why that other character is acting the way they do or saying what they do. They need some understanding of that other character's motivation. You also need your character's worldview in every scene because that's going to influence their reactions to what's going on in the scene. What belief system is your character using to operate in the world? What actions the character takes in the scene to achieve their objective. Remember, dialogue is action, right? And you need a turn. Does the character get what they want in the scene, and what comes out of the conflict, and what causes their emotions to change? And is their objective achieved? Yes or no? And then last of all, you need that exiting emotional state. What is their emotional state at the end? And if not the opposite of the entering emotional state, it needs to be different than the entering emotional state. So if you're writing a scene and you feel like something's not working, deconstruct the scene and see if all the elements are present. A scene is about creating a moment in the story. A story is a string of small moments that build up to the transformation of the character. So no matter how big or small, every scene is a revelation. And I think if you just keep that in mind, every scene is a revelation. Um, that'll keep you from including scenes that don't contain any change. Okay, I hope that helped. And as always, please put comments below the video and start a conversation about all of this. Writing scenes is challenging, and you want your scenes to work because they build your story sequence by sequence by sequence, moment by moment by moment. All right, keep writing, and I'll see you next week.